Hi, everyone, and welcome to our AMA. My name is Shanna McCardle, and I am the Event and Partner Relationship Director here at the Sports Innovation Lab. For those of you who haven't attended an AMA before, let me just tell you a little bit about our AMA series. This is designed to create a new channel of access to leaders during a time when more than ever, taking risks and taking action became critical to the survival of the industry. We've had some incredible guests on our AMA so far. We've had an NBA champion, we've had Olympians, executives from the Boston Celtics, Spartan Race, Cisco, Intel. I could go on and on. So we've really been lucky with the guests that we've had. And I encourage all of you to check out our past recordings on our website. I will make sure to share that link with you in the chat once I finish up here. Basically, we're trying to garner perspectives from across the industry, from operators to athletes to teams and leagues, to really get their perspectives. And today we have a really interesting guest. Sam Schwartzstein will be joining us. He formerly was with the XFL as the Director of Football Operations, Strategy, and Innovation. I'll go more into his background in a moment, but I just want to run through a few points first. So, first of all, if you enjoyed this AMA today and enjoy the conversation, please join our Slack community to continue the conversation. We kicked off the Slack community back in March. We've grown to well over 1,000 members. It's a great place to share ideas and learn new insights and connect with people in the industry. So here is the link, and I will also post that in the chat once we finish up here. Next Thursday, June 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll be joined by John Coombs. He is a co-founder and CEO of Rover. He's also a good friend of the Sports Innovation Lab, so that should be really interesting conversation. He's going to talk about the apps that he's developed and how fan experiences must innovate to keep and grow fan interest. So really looking forward to that conversation. Just a few points. You're on mute. We ask that you please stay there, but we do want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. So please use the chat function to ask your questions. And this is being recorded, so if you can't make it through the entire session, please visit our website with the recordings listed, or we will also be sending you a full recording once this is over, later today or tomorrow. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this chat function, but just to run through it really quick. You'll see at the bottom of your screen a little chat icon. Just click on that. It will open a window, and you can put your questions right in there. You can post them to everyone, or you can send them directly to me or Josh Walker, who will be moderating this conversation. So many of you know Josh Walker as the president and co-founder of the Sports Innovation Lab. He came to us from Forrester, where he's a VP of research, and he currently stewards our research team here at the Sports Innovation Lab. Josh is responsible for introducing the world to the concept of the fluid fan. He has recently been quoted in publications such as Sports Illustrated, Synopsis, and Future Sport, as he has become a preeminent voice in what the resurgence of sports will look like. And as I mentioned, our guest is Sam Schwartzstein, former Director of Football Operations, Innovation, and Strategy at the XFL. And as you can see here on the slide, he has a really interesting background, but just to highlight a few points, Sam was the first employee hired by Oliver Luck in July of 2018 and was tasked with 2 goals: playing great football week 1 and reimagining the game. Over the next 22 weeks, Sam and his team used a traditional product development approach and created 15 new professional football rules, highlighted most by the re-engineered kickoff. Sam pursued his education while playing football at Stanford, where he was the captain of the first Rose Bowl championship team at Stanford in 50 years. So really impressive background, and we're thrilled to have Sam here today. So with that, I will pass it over to Josh.
All right, thank you, Shanna. Shanna mentioned that we have John Coombs joining us next week. It's important to acknowledge that when we started this AMA series, it was really in response to COVID and how the sports industry was going to come back stronger than it was. A number of issues obviously have surfaced recently in the news that are not related to COVID. We felt like Tuesday was an important time to take a pause from this series and really give space for that dialogue. We will have John next week. We really appreciate his flexibility in doing that, and it was the right thing to do. And with that, I'm going to turn to this guest. Sam has joined us, and I've had a number of conversations with Sam since we really talked about him joining us. It's one of those things where For our innovation, we're lucky by still leagues. They think in terms of, hey, there's got to be white space in the market. There's got to be an opportunity to do things differently than the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball. All these old traditional leagues aren't innovating and shaking things up. And that's certainly some of the mindset that was behind bringing back the XFL. We talked about Sam's bio a little bit. He was one of the first employees there. So I'm going to start by asking Sam to kind of give us a sense of what the hell were you guys thinking? Why did you think there was white space in this market? Why did you think there was an opportunity to develop another professional football league? When you joined, what was the business mindset of the group of executives that you were starting to work with?
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and thanks everyone for coming and joining, taking part of this conversation. Excited to be doing it, giving a little distraction for what's going on in the rest of the world. So Vince announced the league was coming back in about Vince McMahon, January 25th, 2018. And he was going to put 2 years before he launched the league. The first time he launched the XFL in 2001, there was a timing of 9 months to get a league started, very similar to what the AAF did. And it was too ambitious. So knowing he had about 2 years to get this thing done, okay, we might actually be able to do this thing. Oliver Luck got hired on in June of 2018, the first major hire as the commissioner running the league. And then he hired me. When I joined, Vince had already done a polling of 6,000 fans and had a basic business model of what was there. So they were basing the league on what fans told them. There was 38 million more football fans that wanted more football. That 16 weeks and a playoff wasn't enough for them in the professional ranks. And they wanted it year-round. Most popular sport in the country for a reason. They did research identifying that there was 4 different types of fan groups that they were going to go after. That was 3 different types. It was the hardcore fanatic fan that's going to watch any form of football. You put an F in the 3 letters that you have describing your league, and they're going to watch. Then you have the social casual, the person who's just going to go to the bar and they want to have something to do on a Saturday, have an event to go and hang out with their friends, not super into the game. And then lastly, you have the solo spectator. And that's a person that's going to want to gamble. They're going to want to play fantasy. And they all had something in common to where the game of football wasn't the game made for them. It wasn't a fan's game. It was a game that was being catered to the ownership, the current coaching regime. They wanted something new and exciting. And that was kind of what was pressed onto me. So, hey, when you're creating a football league, you're going to now create a league for the fans. And one of my first meetings I had with Vince that really got me excited about the league was he said to me, it's not my league, it's not Oliver's league, it's not your league, it's the fans' league. And when we started looking at what processes and what things we were going to do from our player compensation model, as we're building that out to our rule set, we got to have a common goal of what does the fan want, right? You have to see what your players and coaches can execute on, what your support staff can execute on, and that kind of knocks some of the ideas you have off. But always, as long as you're maintaining the focus of the fan, that was it. So knowing that there was a marketplace for fans, we knew what types of fans we wanted to go after, and then ultimately, what can we do to build to that? What will our budget be? How much investment we have? We knew we had at the time in a non-COVID world, we had enough funding for 3 years. But with uncertainty on whether or not you can play or not next year, we knew we couldn't play for the rest of this year. That kind of put a damper on what Vince was trying to do. So knowing that, we were building something for the longevity, that what you saw in year 1 was not necessarily the completed vision of what we were going to go for.
So you arrive. They've done some thorough market research. They've done some fan segmentation. They've decided that there's a business opportunity here. What were your expectations about what the next year or two was going to be like for you personally? Did you have skepticism that they had identified the right market need?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing I did after starting was just go through the entire NFL rulebook and see every line by line, why do they have it in the rulebook? And you'll find there's about 12 rules that are specifically for the T formation still currently in the NFL rulebook. Unless you're a hardcore football fan, you don't know anything about the T formation. So there's some drag in that rulebook. So it was identifying, okay, let's see that. And then I dove into research of every startup football league I could, or startup football league, well, a startup league. So I researched heavily esports, which I think is the most successful current startup leagues. Specifically Overwatch League, I think has done a lot of unique stuff there. Looking at the ABA, and then looking at USFL, AAF, who was at the time still building AFL, Arena Football League, and identifying what things did these leagues do well, what things did these leagues do poorly. World Football League. And you'll find out that startup football is very, very hard to do. I recognized early.
I think any startup league is very, very hard to do.
The scale of football and equipment makes it probably one of the hardest leagues to do. The lifespan of the player, the amount of danger the player puts themselves in. I looked at the big three as something, and the big three is the complete opposite of what we were trying to do. We were trying to do traditional football with players the NFL overlooked early in their career, versus the big three was, okay, they're no longer a spot form, but these are still hyper talented players. We're going to create a more or a less athletic game for them to be able to play.
So I'm very keen to get into all the things you learned about this startup experience, but let's see how biased our audience is. I'm going to ask them a polling question. I'm going to ask you all, and Sam, I don't think can see this, but do you think launching the XFL was a good idea? It's a very simple question. It's yes or no. Let's just see where people's heads are at. Oh man, you got a lot of very positive people here, Sam. They think you guys are on the right track.
I see some friends in the participant.
Oh, okay. There you go. You've put some plants on this AMA. Perfect.
Hey, I got some ringers in here. Don't worry. I'm not afraid of stacking the deck.
Okay. Well, it seems like you stacked the deck because 97% have said that it was a good idea for the XFL to be launched. It's shocking to me because, again, you did go through a long list of other leagues where the bodies are buried and, they didn't make it and things of that nature. So let's go back to sort of what you learned through the process. I think a lot of outside observers, too, to give you credit, think that the XFL got off to a very good start, right? If COVID wasn't here, maybe this thing was built to last. Maybe you had something that was there. Besides messing with the rules, which I definitely am going to get into with you because that was your baby, what were you guys doing at the outset that you thought was a positive start to the business of launching this league?
We knew from the get-go that no one on their own was smart enough to do this thing. And so my first official day working for the company was pitching football operations professionals. What could we do? Presented to Jim Caldwell, John Fox, Jason Wright, former player, now working at the NFL. Kevin Guskowitz, who's the head of the Head, Neck, and Spine Committee for the NFL, Dean of Health, Arts, and Sciences at UNC. Bill Squadron, who was part of the team that created the first and 10 yellow line, which is one of the biggest game changers in technology that I'll get into later. And that was, building around that group, we pitched our rules to them, and they gave us a ton. Doug Flutie was a huge valuable asset because he had played in multiple startup football leagues, from the CFL to the USFL, to see what rules could work, get their understanding of what fear they have in these certain markets and what's pushing too far. Then we did the same thing with media outlets, and then I kind of went on an underground route, talking to over 100 people, from casual fans, sports talk personalities. The data community was a big friend of mine. Ben Baldwin's a friend of mine. Josh Hermsmeyer, all these guys that were able to show me how to identify data to help me drive my change a little bit differently. And so that was a part of it. Made it so that, we didn't assume just because we got all of our football coaches in a room that we were going to be able to come up with good rules, going to come up with a good strategy. It was, you need to go to the entire marketplace because you're building this game for them. You're building your fan experience for them. So we went directly to these people to help identify what we wanted to do, what we were going to build this league, and just gleaned all those ideas from history, from what the AFL did, which in my opinion is the only startup football league that's ever succeeded, now being merged with the NFL. And we targeted a lot of things that they did and how we modernize what they did. They were the first team, they had first version of the shotgun offense was there. So they had high scoring points. And then they also took on a talent vacuum where the NFL was restricting black players in their league. And so a majority of the high quality black players were going to the AFL. So we were looking at guys like Kenny Robinson, who had college eligibility left, how do we get those players? PJ Walker, who's a dual threat quarterback. There's about 4 teams in the NFL that have dual threat quarterbacks, so he's an untapped resource. How do we put him into our game and make sure that he's highlighted in the right direction? So it was identifying and talking to people. We talked to John Madden about his experience with the AFL. These different people helped guide us into where we could have a game built for fans.
Tell me a little bit about how you guys chose the markets that you decided to launch in.
Yeah, so the markets was a really interesting thing that made us different is we chose TV markets. That's pretty much what it is, with the exception of Chicago not making the final cut. So when I arrived, Chicago and San Francisco were then replaced by Seattle and Tampa. These were because Tampa gave us another temperate climate. Football is the biggest thing in Florida, so we wanted to have a Florida market. In Seattle's a great story. I'll tell it here. But when they showed the manifesto video at a house show for WWE, it was the largest cheer they got, and that's why we because Vince was there and he heard the largest possible cheer. So it turned out because they showed up, and they love football there. Pacific Northwest is a crazy place. They showed up to every event we did, even our regional combines. So those two ended up making the list. San Francisco was a hard one to not put on because of the market for television, but also it was the #1 spot in 2001 when they played at Pac Bell Park, and it was the cheapest place because Pac Bell Park had just opened. Now, when you come to now, the most expensive stadium that we're looking at going at was Oracle Park. So the same spot, just times have changed. 3 championships have helped out San Francisco Giants.
A lot of the startup leagues that come to us for strategic advice are always planning on not playing in front of fans. And now we have another reason why people are doing that level of strategic thinking. But, early in the Sports Innovation Lab's history, a lot of the startup leagues are like, look, we can't anticipate that we're going to be a success out of the gate at the gate. So what are we going to do from a media rights perspective? How are we going to make sure people can access our content and our product from home? What was your assumption going into the development of the XFL, that you were going to reach and generate revenue more on the media rights side or more on the gate side? What was the balance between those two?
So I don't think anyone is better at selling tickets than Vince McMahon of the WWE. So I don't think they're scared of selling tickets. They sold 1 million tickets last time, led by Basil DeVito. So that was not a fear of theirs. I think times have changed since then. But that was not a fear. I was the first business plan I ever put in did not have tickets being sold. I was against trying to boil that ocean and go straight to media rights, because media rights would pay for our whole business in years to come once we prove out our model. But because they wanted to go the non-traditional route, that did not scare them. We had some great people working on our ticket platform with Elevate, which is a great partner, and Ticketmaster. So I think that didn't scare them, but also knowing that the power of Vince had, right? 2018, right after they signed the Fox deal for SmackDown, great relationships in the sports world. WWE is on ESPN every night, made a healthy transition. That doesn't mean that places weren't pitched, like Turner, like Amazon. All these places were pitched, but it was trying to find out what will give us the most reach and get the most fans with us. So having over half our games on broadcast television instead of cable was a piece of why we ended up going with ESPN and Fox.
Let me push on the media strategy a little bit, because one of the things that we hear a lot of sports properties trying to balance, and FC Barcelona is a perfect example. They just launched their own direct OTT platform to their consumers, I think this week. The idea is that, they don't want to be beholden to the broadcasters telling them about their fans. They want to own that first party fan data. You guys could have gone that direction. You could have developed a direct to consumer thing. You could have gone with Twitch and thought about making it a smaller audience, but a more interactive audience. Maybe the gaming and the betting thing happens more interactive on those types of digital platforms than broadcast. What was the thinking of evaluating the pros and cons of those different approaches?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said, because that was what I was originally pitched. So, as we talk about rules, the hardest rule for me to get down right was getting the right number of plays to get the right amount of scoring in under 3 hours. If you eliminate 45-minute commercials from a 2 hour or a 3 hour and 17-minute game in the NFL, I don't have to do anything. I can just give you my 2.5-hour game. That was easy for me. That the original sales pitch I had. And a lot of leagues cannot function because they have the golden handcuffs, the golden shackles of the broadcast partners. And so, but once we started pitching and Oliver was doing his road show to get the right broadcast partners, we knew that we were going to be over the air for over half our games. That's when we said, okay, now we have to do some strategic things on play clock and timing to be able to hit our still goals and still what the fans want to pitch. But it's more important for us year 1, 2, and 3 and beyond to be able to get the product to the fan.
Mm-hmm.
We do have 8 teams. We're not starting small scale with 4 teams. We're in these big markets. We want to provide as much value to them as possible. And having the backing of Vince lets you do that, lets you be as big as possible.
Marty's asking a question, and it was one that was definitely going to be brought up by me if someone didn't do it, which is a lot of the thinking or a lot of the public narrative around the XFL was that this was almost like a developmental league for the NFL. And so Marty asked, was there ever a consideration of making this league a paid alternative for college football players, meaning similar to the G League, the way that they're approaching things now?
Yeah, I think that's what fans are going to see in future years. National name, image, likeness, and that college football will change a lot of that model if people are planning to do startup football leagues again. I believe that the only way we were going to survive in the long term was using that talent vacuum. Guys like Jerry Jeudy had no business playing his junior year of college in the NFL or in college football. So we were going to go down that route, but we were going to build to that. There was enough viable players for year 1 of a product to get it done. We had a test subject in Kenny Robinson who did have eligibility that he surpassed or he did not do to play football with us at the XFL, and then was drafted in the 5th round this year. We were going to see ourselves as a pathway to the NFL from a college player, because that's just where the talent vacuum is from the NFL. This is not innovative in its lightest, because the USFL had Herschel Walker go after 3 years when at the time the NFL had a 4-year restriction. That's why we have a 3-year restriction in the NFL. So like it was going to be super different in breaking the mold. Spencer Haywood did the same thing in the ABA instead of going to the NBA. There was different ways that we could do these innovative things, but the talent was definitely still there for year 1. We were going to have different hooks every year, and players, those types of players would come in.
Well, some of your former colleagues are chiming in here too, so I'll ask the question that I think they're asking in a different way, because I promised you I would anyway. What were your favorite innovative changes to the rule book? Like, if you had to pick 3, what are the 3 things that you think you came up with that really changed the way that the game was being played?
Kickoff, I think, was a big one for us.
And for people who are listening, just explain what you changed about kickoff, because they may not know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the reasoning, because as we did a traditional product development approach that you're used to, that anyone who's built a tech product is used to, which is this build, test, repeat model. And so we did 8 sessions of testing, all backed by data each time we did it, versus other leagues just put an idea out there and just in training camp they had to change it. So
when you say testing, you mean you did live simulations of the kickoff and a bunch of different variations to figure out which one you liked? With
different talent levels, with different coaching staffs over different time periods, because we wanted to test we did 2 testing sessions with one league, 3 days, but 10 days apart. Give them time to marinate it, because football, although it may look the same to the casual fan, every week it changes how people are approaching the game. So that we wanted to have longevity in it as well. We tested with JUCO players. The first time we ever tested, we tested with all of our rules with semi-pro players in York Hall Football, which is a great company run by Julie Maringer. Really innovative product that they have. And then the Spring League, we tested 3 separate times, 6 total games with the Spring League, with our broadcast partners involved as well. So we were able to see all of our rules, which had never been done before in football. The kickoff was interesting because it's a big groan from players, coaches, and fans alike. It's 6% of all plays and 21% of all concussions. So you're over 3 times more likely to get a concussion on that play than any other play in football. So the way the rules are developed in the NFL or in college football is to increase touchbacks not reduce impact hits. So by increasing touchbacks, you're increasing or decreasing the amount of plays, so you can pat yourself on the back for decreasing the amount of concussions. So if you don't have that many plays, but that's also a groan for the fans. So 70% of kickoffs are touchbacks in college football in the NFL. And
So from a health and safety reason, it makes sense to eliminate that risk for the XFL.
Right.
One of the things that so what was the benefit from the product perspective, other than the logical reason you just gave?
So,
was it to speed it up? Was it to do something? No.
It was to provide a play. So 4 tenets of what fans told us they wanted us to change about the game as we changed our rules. The first was decrease the overall time of the game and decrease the amount of time during the between plays. They wanted to have a more dynamic game, so give me more rhythm. Don't just have a kickoff commercial. They wanted to have less meaningless plays. So there are about 20 meaningless plays in the NFL. We had about 3 per game.
Mm-hmm.
Then they wanted to have traditional football without creating new safety issues. So the XFL created a new coin toss in the first time around with the scramble, where 2 players sprinted for a ball, made it a show of skill to get those players. Well, on live television, we have an AC sprain, the first ever thing that you see from the XFL in 2001. So we didn't want to do that. Our fans did not want our players to put in more danger. They know the game is dangerous, but not have them in more danger. So what we focused on was, with our kickoff, how do we have 90+% kickoffs returned versus the NFL is 30. And so we saw more action there, but not have that injury risk. So we had 0 concussions on 90 or 110 kickoffs in our league. And that was because instead of having the player start 5 yards or 10 yards of sprint 35 yards, then create a collision, we started the players where they normally make the collision, 5 yards apart at the plus 35. Other leagues have not thought of this because you no longer have what's called a surprise onside kick in this situation, because the reason why you start 10 yards apart is for an onside kick. So now we use the election system with the NFL implemented probably 2011 when you could elect to go for 1 or 2. We provided that election system now at the kickoff. You elect to go for 1 or to kick it deep or have an onside kick. So we looked at what we're losing the surprise onside kick. Everyone remembers the 2009 Super Bowl, most exciting play. Well, when we removed that, we looked at how often are surprise onside kicks. Well, they're 1% of kickoffs are onside kicks. 1% of those onside kicks are surprise onside kicks. So we realized for 0.01, for 1 basis point percentage of kickoffs, we have our players running full speed into each other. So we improved that part of it. Coaches, really proud of that rule, because coaches pushed back at nearly every level on this rule until the media said, wow, this is really cool. So I want to thank my friend Mike Florio for helping me out there, because that was a big risk. That was a big departure from what they're normally used to. But we knew for our league to be successful, we had to do something big, something that put our neck out there to make this exciting for our fans.
Okay. So I promised you could go through your top 3, but you burned your time on that one. So you're going to have to tell us quickly, what are your other 2 favorite rules?
Overall timing rules, and then the 1, 2, 3 extra point conversion.
Awesome. Okay. So somebody asks, would you return to the XFL if they brought you back?
It depends on who buys the league and ownership, and then what management team we're putting in place. But I think it's a viable league. I would join, something I'm still passionate about, something I spent time for a while on.
So I'm going to use this opportunity to launch a second polling question. Do you think the XFL should return next year? So while people are answering this question, can you give us a little bit of background on what's going on right now behind the scenes? Are there bankers shopping this? Is McMahon selling it? What's the latest?
From my understanding, they're in a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The auction is set for in August. They're currently putting out options for bidders to collect the debt, as well as create a new league with a plan to play in beginning of next year.
It's probably public, but do you have any sense of what the debt is?
I do not have a sense of what the debt is.
Okay. Well, you got, again, I don't know if this is you stacking the deck or not, but you've got about 90% of folks want to see the XFL return next year. So, hopefully that perhaps leads you to make some career decisions. So another question here is, so let me just share these results real quick. What plans, if any, did the XFL have in developing a video game with Madden, with somebody else? Were there plans in the works to do something on the video gaming side?
We spoke to a couple open source type games. There's one unique. We spoke to Doug Flutie, Maximum Football, and then another company I don't remember. But Maximum Football was interesting because it was a way, the engine of the game already lets you change the rules, so it would not have been hard to build from the ground up. Although our rules, there was only 15 of them, 5 of them were borrowed from current college football. It's still hard to kind of change those rules from our data partners to everybody. It was hard to change some of those things. I think for year one, it was trying to be more focused on gameplay as well as the fan experience, because like we said, we already extended ourselves providing media excitement as well as gate excitement, getting people in the stadium. I think that would have divested. We had a couple conversations with the people at 2K, but I think that was too far down the road.
So Robert asks, can you speak to the advantages of a league-owned team model like the XFL or Premier League lacrosse versus when it comes to implementing these innovative rules, right? So you want to make changes, is it better to have the league-owned team model than the traditional owner model?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I only answered to one person. That was actually the fan. It wasn't Vince or Oliver when we made rule changes. I need to see what my coaches could execute on. In the NFL, there's a competition committee. The owners have to vote on every single rule. Most of the rules have to do with maintaining my level of success and winning a championship. Everyone at the league office did not care who won the league championship. We wanted the best possible product for our fans. Mm-hmm. We looked at one of my favorite meetings from a funny perspective. We talked to a marketing agency to help us identify how we get these great fans. And, they showed us all these different metrics. And one metric was higher of having great fans, and that was production. I go, can you define production as just win games? So if your team wins games, you'll have more fans. So I was like, oh, should I just have every team win a game? I can put a rule in there where everyone gets a win at the end of the game. But it was really about that gameplay. So Tampa Bay was one of my favorite teams towards the end of the season because they were playing the game that fans wanted, all one-score games, 90-plus offensive plays, big third down conversions. But they were 1-4 at the end of the season. But that was a team that I saw, wow, this is giving the fans what they want from a gameplay perspective. So it was easier for us because at the end of the day, it wasn't about winning and losing the game. It was about providing the fans what they wanted. It was about providing different things. And so when a coach punts from the 39 in our game, I can say, hey, bud, our fans don't want that.
Mm-hmm. So so you have this experience, and this does give you, I think, the credibility to opine on the answer to Robert's question, because he drops our terminology in his question, the fluid fan, right? In the age of the fluid fans can decide between all types of entertainment, right? If something's fast, it's exciting. If they want to be passive, sit back. The fluid fan's in control. Do you think that the traditional sports models, which are beholden to the tradition, the ability to compare, the Green Bay Packers of 1964 to the Dallas Cowboys of, 1987, is an important thing that dooms these traditional leagues? Or do you think there's room for them to innovate? They just need to accelerate that thinking.
I envy those leagues because they have a built-in fan base regardless of the players that leave. So the two big ones for that fluid fan that I looked at is esports. So League of Legends is probably the best, most valuable esports property. And they had to just recently franchise from what they were normally doing because the fluid fan was following the players wherever they went. And the players, before they even had a players union, had too much power. Players became part owners of teams because that fluid fan knew, hey, I'm just going to follow Berg Jurgensen wherever he goes. So that's the problem with the fluid fan, and where you can region lock a team like Overwatch League, which had the New York Excelsior. So fans from New York who might not know anything, they also will choose New York, and then they might stay with New York regardless of what players leave. So the ingrained, normal, region locked, traditional team leagues, it's hard for them to innovate, but it's easier for them to retain fans per their properties. Right? When you own every team in the league, it doesn't matter if they switch from team to team. because of that. But if you have a fan that's able to go from place to place, that player, because they're following a player, that player has too much power for that league to be sustainable.
One of the things everybody likes to talk about that the Premier League lacrosse is doing is miking up their players. Our very own Jack Barlow followed you guys very closely because he also doubles as like our sports betting expert at the Sports Innovation Lab. He asked you, the broadcasts were very different, right? You had the traditional NFL games where you can't hear anything, but you guys had the commentators talking about betting odds. The reporters were on the benches. You've created access that the NFL broadcasts just don't really provide yet. What was the thinking behind that? I mean, it certainly sounds like it's the same idea of give the fans more, but what did you think you were gaining by allowing them to hear this? Was it filler content? Was it the content they needed to make bets? Where was the strategy behind that?
Everything we did was about opening the door to fans of things they hadn't seen before, the things they hadn't gotten. It's viral when Musburger says, "My friends in the desert will be thinking about this play," right? Why not have that every play? Everyone knows that people are betting. Everyone knows that even the announcers are, probably have something at stake on the game. And our broadcast team, led by Len Mead, there's your shout out, Len.
I was going to say that name looks familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it was all about maintaining what could they do, what they feel comfortable with. Partners were different with ESPN having a partnership with Caesars and Fox having their own with Fox Bet. And, how do they want to each leverage their broadcast in unique ways and let the fan choose, right? So I think, ironically, ESPN was a little more open. Especially showing the live odds throughout the game. There was a couple times, we just wanted to make sure that everything was up to legal standards. So John Scheller and his team met with every single sports commission for the places that we were being had markets in, so where we were trading pretty much, and made sure that we had gambling odds there. Opening up the mics to the fans, the technology, it scared our coaches to death, but the technology and the way that delays work and the ways that we're able to monitor what's going on. I had a headset that had every single play call on every time. So it was like being in the Matrix, hearing 4 play calls at once. And to make sure that we had integrity with what was going on over there and how it didn't affect the gameplay. But, most of the stuff means Spanish, but to the hardcore football fan, that's really cool to hear 2-jet scat hockey. You know what play's coming next. Everyone gets to be Romo with that type of play call. And so that was important for us. So we asked the broadcasters, Ed Placey, Bill Bunnell, Judy Boyd, we asked them what they wanted to do, and we saw what was feasible. The one I regret not doing better was the booth to coach was really important for us because getting Greg McElroy and Steve Levy to talk directly to the coach during the game, that was unique to us. PLL probably does the best player to booth to player interviews. They had one that we used as an example, but it ended up going viral and people thought it was rigged because he scored while having an interview go on. One of the players did. So we want to see what would be viable for our coaches. How could we make it so that it doesn't seem staged, and be able to give them that technology. We took that technology away because we want to highlight other things we're ultimately going to be back in week 6. But it was all about giving fans a little bit more, giving them behind the scenes look.
Did you have to become an expert on sports betting and integrity and trying to make sure that there was protections in place to make sure you guys were protecting the action that was happening around the game?
That was a big deal. Our gambling policy was really important to get nailed down. We partnered with Genius Sport to make sure that we had all that put together correctly. Our legal counsel, Molly Friedman, Olivier, they all put everything together to make sure that we were good there. A lot of things I thought I was going to change some rules. I became expert on workers' compensation, which kills all these startup football leagues. An expert in sports gambling, and I never bet before. One of the things we had an issue the week 4, I want to say. It wasn't an issue, but in the state of New Jersey, you cannot have negative props. So you cannot have a bet that has like interceptions, because a quarterback can now influence that interceptions. And because we're paired outside of most of our quarterbacks, our players are paid so little, they're at risk, much like college players are. LeBron is not going to break a bunch because of a prop that's out there because he's getting paid $45 million. But our players are more at risk, making $55,000. So, negative props were scary. We had it on for 1 week, and then we took it off the next week. Things like that, where how do we maintain everything being kosher?
It's crazy. We had one of our advisors, Dr. Layla Mintus, who worked on the integrity and really just making sure that FIFA and Sport Radar and some of these companies that really have to be mindful of what's being transmitted from the venue into the sports book is authentic and is validated and things of that nature. And negative props did not come up, but I can understand why that would be an issue. We're getting close toward the end of the hour, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a bunch of nerdy questions about the tech. So tell me, basically, when it's a startup league, who makes those tech decisions? What technology did you guys obsess about? Was it 5G technology and connectivity? Was it broadcast enhancements and digital graphics? Was it the sports betting stuff we were just talking about? What is it, audio acoustics on the sideline? What were you guys doing in the boardroom to be like, okay, we need to make a few big bets here in year one. We'll deal with the rest of this stuff down the road.
So we looked at pretty much everything. We had design testing sessions early in 2018, and it was interesting because we're talking to people, the people who Basil Vito and Vince McMahon, who helped propagate Skycam, right? So everything for year one was what's going to be our Skycam. And the more we talked to people, the more it became clear that audio was going to be our Skycam. And how do we do audio unique as well as kind of cheap? So instead of having to put an IFB on every coach, you can also just have their headset be linked up. So my nerd brother in arms, David Michael, is here. I know I see him in the audience, and we once we got the goals from the league is how do we put this stuff together? So Lars Osterlund, Brian Raines, those guys helped put together a package, and we ended up going with the Riedel system, which is used in a Formula One. So brand new system for our coaches. We're normally used to CoachCom or the Bose system in the NFL. We wanted to do something unique, completely wireless. So for this group, that's very easy to think about. Wow, why wouldn't you do completely wireless? That's brand new. The NFL recently went to a wireless version. Coaches are still fighting. Sean Payton still has a wire. So we had to do something unique on that ground front because audio became that push. So from coach to booth audio, player to player audio, where are we going to let the people go in? So it became, Len and Steve and their teams had to find out, can we put people in the bench area? The bench area is normally sacred. People think the bench area is literally benches. No, it's defined lines on the field. That trap is what you see. And that's normally a restricted area to audio and to the media group, and we put them in there. Go, you have free reign. Here's a special color vest that anyone can make at Home Depot. Here's what you got. That was part of what it was, and so we went audio. And one of the scariest things was coach-to-player audio was our biggest innovation. NFL has it 1-to-1 with the coordinator to the quarterback. We had a head coach able to switch to talk to both sides of the field. We had a coordinator able to talk to then all the skill position players on offense and defense. Totally innovative, and let the coaching staff or the broadcast tap into that. We had nothing 30 days before kickoff. So David, Michael, and I, that was a big passion project for us that we didn't really sleep all of January putting that together.
So I'm not enough of a networking nerd to understand what this all means, but did that mean that you had to have the concept of like VPNs for each wireless channel, like so that people are just not overlapping or getting access to?
So Riedel's unique in the wireless network and why we chose it. So we went from, and David's probably going to kill me if I get this wrong, but we went from a deck.
Well, David can also chime in. We can unmute him if you say anything wrong. So go ahead.
Yeah, but we went from a deck network to a 900 hertz network, which are coach to player. And our deck network was already pretty close. It's that same wireless network, protected network that your home phone would have, or your wireless home phone. So it's a protected network. Riedel has a license to use it. So it was pretty easy to get there. We worked with CPM, I think CPM, I'm not sure exactly the name, but the wireless company to do all of our pregame. What is this being locked down? And then we had our coach to player was already an encrypted service, but the patent that David, Lars, Brian, and myself put together was a way and was to put to how do you go from deck network to a magic little box, as we called it, to now to a 900 hertz network. Our coach to player. And again, there was zero of that 30 days before kickoff. So
Were you computer science or an engineer at Stanford?
No, but I listen and am able to regurgitate.
There you go. Well, that sounded pretty good. Real quick, I'm going to ask my last polling question because now that Sam sort of walked through all of this with us, I'm keen to understand if you guys think that, let's just forget football, take any professional sport. Do you think there's room in the market for a new professional sports league? You're hearing Sam talk about all the thinking that went into the XFL, all the different strategy decisions that needed to be made, both from the rule book, gameplay, and the technology. It's interesting to note that there are a lot of other leagues that are starting up right now. We have one client called Athletes Unlimited, which is launching with softball in August. Sam, you mentioned Your Call Football. They've been doing a bunch of different trials over the years. Julie's a former colleague of mine. We have World One, which is a startup that's out in California that's trying to innovate and do new things with the Olympic sports and the individual sports. So keen to see that 75% of you believe that there is room for more professional sports, even in an environment where our airways are packed with sports content. Does that surprise you, Sam?
Probably does surprise me. I think it's a lot of people that voted that they wanted the XFL back. Wanted, I think a professional sports league could exist. That's an interesting stat. But I think there are unique ways to do it. Athletes Unlimited, my girlfriend has a podcast, Jennifer Sarah Believe in Softball, where she talked at length about Athletes Unlimited because it is so unique in what they're doing. There's nothing like Athletes Unlimited. I don't know if it's going to work, but I know that they're at least trying something and they're focused that could be something, especially with the fluid fan, because then they get to change their fan group every week if they're following.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's a very innovative model.
I think that professional sports themselves are really hard to do, especially with the current unions that are in place on either side and what you're going to try and borrow from. But I'll never forget a phone call I got from Pep Hamilton, one of our coaches in DC, summer of last year. And he goes, "Sam, why am I watching American Gladiators playing golf right now?" And he was watching Holy Moly in the middle of July. Non-COVID world, that's the kind of things that on broadcast television. So
yeah. There's people watching marble runs right now, so we got all kinds of crazy things happening.
Legitimate sports leagues, they are the number one hot sport or TV property. Gambling only getting bigger. There's going to want to be more things to gamble on. People gamble on third division tennis, right? Like it is what people are going to want. And if someone's putting a line on something, they need something to put a line on. I think that they'll be able to have an opportunity. It's just really hard.
Well, Sam, I hope for your benefit something happens with the XFL so you have at least the option to do that next. But you're a super smart guy. We could have gone another hour at least talking football and rules, and I would have loved every minute of it. But tell me what you're going to do next. Like, what do you want to do? Like, you're where are you now? You're in California, Connecticut?
All the above.
All the above. You're bouncing
I'm on
around.
Long Island right now, yeah. So I haven't lived anywhere for over a month since COVID broke out. But yeah, I'm looking for another great team. I think that's what it is. A lot of people from my team are on this call. And what was nice is to get hired at the XFL, you had to really care about football and care about your teammates. And so that's mostly what I'm looking for. I'd love to stay in sports, love to stay in football. I think we have our team put together a pretty lasting legacy of the rules and the innovations that we put forward on and kind of pressed upon the NFL and college football. Love to talk to more people at the NFL, more people at the NCAA, but also if there are other leagues that are out there that want just guidance or want information about what I learned over 22 months of pretty much startup boot camp, ready to help anybody. And I know
what a fantastic career experience. So the last question I'll ask is one I didn't get to, which is of all the stuff you innovated on. Somebody asked earlier, and I failed to ask this, so I apologize. What do you think the NFL would adopt? Like, if there's one thing that you guys did that seems like a no-brainer, is it the kickoff? Is it 3 points?
The kickoff seems like a no-brainer, but it's hard to get coaches to wrap their mind knowing the competition committee aspects. I think that's hard. I think every coach would be okay with coach-to-player communication being expanded, largely because it's a coaching solve. you would not have any stolen signals anymore. So it all depends on how you pitch that competition committee. So that's how I pitched it to my coach, and that's how they bought in. I said, you can pick up Armani Edwards and play him in a week because you can just tell him every route to run.
Yeah.
Versus you wouldn't be able to do that. So I think coach to player is something that they'll expand upon. They already have a partner with GSC. They have people that they can expand it with. Proprietary, but David and I were working on something that was going to explode the coach to player market in the future. So there's a lot of growth in that option to be able to make something unique there for both the fans and the coaches.
Well, look, man, like I said, I think you're an incredibly smart guy. I really appreciate spending time with us and letting us see the insides of this thing. I think a lot of people are paying attention to whether or not out of bankruptcy it comes back, because I think objectively as a fan, it was really cool to see that the stands were full and that there was energy around these local teams. As an industry observer, technology analyst, a researcher, it was very, very important for me to understand whether or not you guys were tapping into true white space, or if Vince McMahon was doing his special sauce and rubbing some WWE all over this thing and seeing if it would work. But appreciate you going through everything with us. Definitely stay part of our community. Would love to see your name bouncing around in Slack. And we'll let Shanna wrap things up. But thanks for joining us today, Sam.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Sam. And if everyone wants to stay connected to Sam, I know he's in the Slack community, so please join. I posted the link in the chat window, so please join that, and I'll also send out a link so you'll be able to join after this AMA. And then finally, don't forget to register for our AMA next Thursday, June 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be joined by John Coombs, CEO and co-founder of Rover, at 1 p.m. So it should be a really great conversation, and we hope to see you then. But thank you all for joining us today. And thank you,
Thanks,
Sam.
Shanna. Thank you, guys. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.